Something brushed the Mafia boss's hand and his world stopped. Not a weapon. A crumpled $5 bill held by a shaking little girl who whispered, "They're coming for my mom tonight." He could walk away and keep his empire intact, or stay and start a war that would burn an entire neighborhood to the ground. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow. And while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. The Mafia boss was mid-stride when something brushed his palm. Not a blade, not a weapon, a crumpled $5 bill. He stopped. A little girl stood before him, hair tangled and damp, clothes 2 sizes too big, clutching that bill like it was the only thing keeping her standing. "Sir, please," she whispered. "Take this and save my mom." His men closed in immediately, hands near holsters, eyes scanning for threats. Baptiste raised one finger. Everything froze. No one handed Baptiste Paris money. People paid him in silence, in fear, in territory. This child was offering him pocket change like it could buy a miracle. He lowered himself to one knee, bringing his sharp gaze level with hers. The streetlight caught the edge of his slicked-back hair, the tattoos creeping up from his collar, the expensive watch glinting against his wrist. He looked every inch the predator he was, but his voice came out quiet, controlled. "Why me, little one?" She swallowed hard, forcing words past the terror. "Because you're the only one strong enough," she said, voice cracking. "And the police? They won't come." That made him pause. She stepped closer, desperation overwhelming fear. "They're coming tonight," she said. "The bad men. They said if my mom doesn't pay, they'll hurt her. And we have nothing left." That's when he saw it, the purple shadow beneath her left eye, half hidden by hair, the torn hem of her pink shirt, the worn-through sneakers that had seen too many miles. The way she kept glancing back toward the shadows, as if monsters might already be watching. Baptiste slowly accepted the $5 bill, folding it carefully between his tattooed fingers, not because it held value, but because whatever this child was about to tell him was worth more than all the money in his vault. Behind him, his midnight blue Bentley idled at the curb, engine purring like a sleeping beast. 2 men stood flanking it, one broad-shouldered and bald, the other lean with hard eyes. Both wore dark suits. Both were armed. Both were waiting for their boss's signal to make this problem disappear. But Baptiste didn't give that signal. Instead, he studied the girl's face. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Dirt smudged her cheek, her jeans were patched at the knees, but her eyes, those eyes held something he recognized, something he'd seen in his own reflection decades ago. Desperation mixed with defiance, the look of someone who knew they were powerless but refused to give up anyway. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rowan," she said quietly. "Rowan Moore." "Rowan." He tested the name. "And your mother?" "She's sick. She can't work anymore. But the men, they don't care. They said we still have to pay." Her small hands clenched into fists. "They said tonight is the last chance." Baptiste glanced up at the building behind her. A rundown apartment complex with broken windows and graffiti-scarred walls. Half the streetlights were out. The whole block reeked of neglect and fear. This wasn't his territory. This was someone else's hunting ground, and interfering here would mean war. He'd built his empire on 3 unbreakable principles: control the chaos, respect the boundaries, and never involve children in the game. This situation violated at least 2 of those rules. "Where's your father?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. "Gone," Rowan said simply. "It's just us." Of course it was. Baptiste looked past her again, into the darkness between the buildings. Somewhere in those shadows, predators were circling. Men who preyed on the weak because they could. Because no one stopped them. Because fear was profitable. He'd been in this business long enough to know how it worked. Small-time enforcers controlled blocks like this through intimidation and violence. They charged protection fees to single mothers, elderly shop owners, anyone too vulnerable to fight back. The police didn't patrol here. Social services didn't come. These neighborhoods existed in a gray zone where the only law was whoever had the most muscle. And tonight, those men were coming for Rowan's mother. "How much does she owe?" Baptiste asked. "I don't know," Rowan admitted. "But they said no more time. They said..." Her voice broke. "They said they'd make her disappear." The words hung in the cold evening air. Behind Baptiste, one of his men, the bald one, shifted his weight. A silent question. Baptiste could feel the tension radiating from his crew. They were waiting for orders, waiting to know if this was their problem or if they were walking away. Baptiste Paris had ruled his territory for 12 years. He'd built his empire on calculated decisions and ironclad discipline. He didn't make choices based on emotion. He didn't get involved in situations that didn't concern him. He especially didn't start wars over children he'd never met. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the way Rowan stood there, tiny and trembling but refusing to run. Maybe it was the $5 bill she'd offered her last possession, her final hope. Maybe it was the bruise under her eye or the tear in her shirt, or the fact that she'd chosen him out of everyone in this city. Or maybe it was something deeper, something he'd buried years ago under layers of violence and power. "Listen to me, Rowan," he said, his voice low and steady. "I need you to tell me everything. Who these men are, how many, what time they usually come. Can you do that?" She nodded quickly, relief flooding her features. "Yes, sir." "Good." He stood, his full height casting a long shadow across the broken pavement. "Start from the beginning, and don't leave anything out." As Rowan began to speak, halting words tumbling over each other in her urgency, Baptiste felt something shift inside him. A line he'd drawn years ago was starting to blur. He'd always told himself that his world and the innocent world didn't mix, that children stayed on their side of the divide and he stayed on his. That protection meant separation, but this girl had crossed that line herself. She'd walked up to one of the most dangerous men in the city and asked for help, and Baptiste Paris was beginning to realize that what she'd asked would force him to break every rule he'd ever lived by. Rowan Moore had learned to count money before she learned to read, not because her mother wanted it that way, but because survival demanded it. Every morning before school, she watched her mom count out bills at the kitchen table, separating what was for rent, what was for food, and what was for them. The men who came every Tuesday and Friday, the men who decided whether they got to stay or had to leave, the men who smiled with their mouths but never with their eyes. Rowan lived with her mother in apartment 3C of the Riverside complex, though there was no river nearby and nothing about the building suggested comfort. The walls were thin enough to hear neighbors arguing 3 floors down. The radiator clanked and hissed but rarely produced heat. The hallway smelled like mildew and old cigarettes, but it was home, and her mother, Claire Moore, had fought to keep it that way for 6 years. Claire worked 2 jobs: mornings at the textile factory on Porter Street, evenings cleaning offices in the business district downtown. She left before Rowan woke up and returned after dark, smelling like industrial soap and exhaustion. But she always came home, always tucked Rowan into bed, no matter how late, always promised that things would get better. The protection system had started 3 years ago, shortly after the Riverside complex changed ownership. New landlords meant new rules, and the new rules came with enforcers. 4 men who controlled everything within a 6-block radius. They knew which women worked where. They knew shift schedules, pay rates, and exactly how much could be extracted without causing complete collapse. They were precise in their cruelty, never taking so much that their victims fled, but always taking enough to keep them desperate. Every week, they made their rounds, apartment by apartment, woman by woman. They called it insurance, protection from break-ins, harassment, violence. Of course, the only violence anyone feared came from them, but that irony was never spoken aloud. Claire paid $40 every Tuesday. $40 that could have bought groceries for a week. $40 that meant Rowan wore secondhand clothes and ate cereal for dinner more often than not, but Claire paid it, because the alternative was worse. Rowan had seen what happened to Mrs. Chen in 2B when she'd tried to negotiate. The woman had shown up at the community clinic with a broken arm and a story about falling downstairs, but Rowan had heard the sounds through the walls that night. The shouting, the crash, the sobbing. Mrs. Chen paid double now, and she never missed a payment. The system worked because fear worked. Because these men understood that control wasn't about constant violence, it was about the threat of violence, about making examples just often enough that everyone else stayed compliant. They operated with impunity because nobody reported them. The police didn't patrol Riverside. When Claire had tried calling once early on, before she understood how things worked, 2 officers had shown up 3 hours later, taken notes, and never returned. 1 week after that call, the lead enforcer, a man with a scar running down his neck and cold eyes that never blinked, had knocked on their door. "We heard you had some concerns," he'd said pleasantly. "About safety." Claire had gone pale. He'd smiled. "Good news. We've decided to increase our protection services for this unit. Your rate just went up to $60 a week." The message was clear. Complaining cost extra. After that, Claire stopped calling anyone. She just paid, week after week, month after month, year after year. Until 6 weeks ago, when everything changed. Claire had been walking home from her evening shift when the pain started sharp and sudden, radiating through her chest and down her arm. She'd collapsed on the sidewalk 3 blocks from home. A neighbor found her and called an ambulance. The diagnosis was cardiac arrhythmia, brought on by stress, exhaustion, and years of running her body into the ground. The doctor prescribed rest, medication, and a significant reduction in physical labor. "You need to slow down," he'd said, "or this will kill you." But slowing down wasn't an option, because slowing down meant less money, and less money meant missing payments. Claire had tried to keep working, but her body wouldn't cooperate. She'd collapsed twice more, once at the factory, once at home. Her supervisor at the textile plant had been sympathetic but firm. She was a liability now. They'd let her go. The cleaning job barely covered rent. There was nothing left for the enforcers. The first time Claire missed a payment, the men had been understanding. They'd given her a week's extension, adding a $20 late fee. The second time, they'd been less patient. 2 weeks, $50 penalty, and a warning. The third time, they'd stopped pretending to be reasonable. Rowan had been at school when they came that afternoon. She'd returned home to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, hands trembling. "Mom?" Claire had looked up, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's okay." But it wasn't okay. Rowan had seen the new bruise forming on her mother's shoulder, had seen the overturned chair that had been righted too carefully, had felt the fear thick in the air like smoke. That night, after Claire thought she was asleep, Rowan had crept to her bedroom door and listened. Her mother was crying. Quiet, desperate sobs that she muffled with her hands so her daughter wouldn't hear. It was the first time Rowan had ever heard her mother break. The deadline came 3 days ago. The man with the scarred neck had delivered it personally, standing in their doorway with 2 others behind him. He'd spoken in that same pleasant tone, as if discussing the weather. "Friday night," he'd said. 9 o'clock. Full payment plus penalties. That's $340, Claire. Her mother's face had drained of color. "I don't have that. I can't. Not my problem." His smile vanished. "You know the rules. Everyone pays. No exceptions. Please, just give me more time. I'm trying to—" "Friday, 9 o'clock. He'd leaned closer. "And Claire? If you're not here when we arrive, we'll find you. We always do. And trust me, you don't want us putting in that effort." Then he'd glanced down at Rowan, who'd been watching from behind her mother's legs. "Cute kid," he'd said. The threat hung unspoken. Now it was Friday, and 9 o'clock was 4 hours away. Claire had tried everything, borrowing from neighbors who had nothing to lend, pawning the few possessions worth anything, even begging her former supervisor for an advance on final pay. Nothing. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like an accusation. Inside, $73. Scraped together from coat pockets, couch cushions, and the jar where Claire kept spare change for laundry. It represented every penny they had left in the world. It wasn't nearly enough. Claire Moore sat across from that envelope, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. The kitchen clock ticked steadily toward 8:15. 45 minutes until the men arrived. 45 minutes to produce money that didn't exist. Rowan watched her mother from the doorway, afraid to move, afraid to speak. She'd never seen her mom like this, completely still, barely breathing, like a rabbit that had spotted the fox and knew running was pointless. "Mom?" Claire's head snapped up. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize her own daughter. Then awareness flooded back, and with it came something worse than fear: resignation. "Baby, I need you to do something for me." Claire's voice was steady, but Rowan heard the tremor underneath. "I need you to go to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Stay there until I come get you." "Why?" "Because I'm asking you to." "But what about Rowan?" Claire stood, crossing to kneel in front of her daughter. She gripped Rowan's shoulders gently. "Listen to me very carefully. When I tell you to go, you go. You don't ask questions. You don't argue. You just go straight to 4B and you stay there. Understand?" Rowan's eyes burned. "They're coming, aren't they?" Claire's composure cracked. Just for a second. Just enough for Rowan to see the terror her mother had been hiding. "Yes. And we don't have the money." "No, sweetheart, we don't. So, what's going to happen?" Claire pulled Rowan into a hug, holding her so tightly it almost hurt. "Nothing you need to worry about. I'll handle it. I always handle it." But Rowan wasn't a baby anymore. She was 7 years old, and she'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to understand what handling it meant. She'd seen the women with black eyes who claimed they'd walked into doors. The ones who limped for weeks and stopped making eye contact. The ones who eventually disappeared. "I can help," Rowan whispered against her mother's shoulder. I can get a job or—" "No." Claire pulled back, gripping Rowan's face between her hands. "You are 7 years old. The only job you have is being a kid, going to school, being safe. That's it. But, promise me." Claire's eyes were fierce now. "Promise me that when I tell you to leave, you'll go to Mrs. Patterson's and stay there. Promise me, Rowan." The words stuck in Rowan's throat. Leaving felt like abandonment, like cowardice. But the look in her mother's eyes left no room for argument. "I promise," Rowan whispered. Claire kissed her forehead. "Good girl. Now go pack your backpack. Books, your stuffed rabbit, anything you want to keep with you tonight." Rowan nodded numbly and retreated to her small bedroom. The space was barely large enough for a twin bed and a dresser, but Claire had made it warm. Drawings Rowan had made in kindergarten covered one wall. A second-hand lamp with a yellow shade sat on the nightstand. The stuffed rabbit Mr. Hopscotch lay on the pillow. She grabbed her school backpack and started filling it mechanically. Books, the rabbit, her favorite sweater. A photograph of her and her mom at the park 2 summers ago, both smiling, both unaware of what was coming. Her hands were shaking. Through the thin wall, she could hear her mother moving around the kitchen, opening drawers, closing them, the scrape of the chair against linoleum. Then, barely audible, the sound of crying. Rowan squeezed her eyes shut, gripping Mr. Hopscotch against her chest. She'd been terrified before of the dark, of storms, of the shadows that seemed to move in her closet at night. But this was different. This was real fear. The kind that sat in your stomach like ice and made your whole body feel heavy. The kind that told you something terrible was about to happen and there was nothing you could do to stop it. A knock sounded at the apartment door. Rowan's heart stopped. Too early. It was only 8:30. They weren't supposed to come until 9, but maybe they'd changed their minds. Maybe they'd decided not to wait. She heard her mother's footsteps, the click of the locks, the creak of the door opening. "Claire? You okay, honey?" Mrs. Patterson's voice. Not the enforcer's. Not yet. Rowan sagged with relief. "I'm fine, Angela," Claire said, but her voice was tight. "Just a rough night." "Rough. Don't even cover it." "Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped lower. "I saw them outside earlier. They're already here, Claire. Waiting in the lot. They brought extra muscle this time." Silence. Then, "How many?" "4 that I counted. Maybe more." Rowan crept to her bedroom door, listening. "Angela, I need to ask you a favor," Claire said quietly. "I need you to take Rowan for the night. Keep her in your apartment. Don't let her leave no matter what she hears." "Can you do that?" "Of course. But Claire, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to talk to them. Explain the situation. They're businessmen, right? They'll understand." Mrs. Patterson's laugh was bitter. "Honey, those men ain't businessmen. They're vultures. And you don't have anything left for them to take except—" She stopped. "I know," Claire said softly. "But maybe I can buy more time. Another week. Anything. And if they say no?" The silence stretched too long. "Then I'll figure something out," Claire finally said. "I always do." But Rowan heard the lie in her mother's voice, the desperate edge that said she was out of options and out of time. Mrs. Patterson must have heard it too, because when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I'm sorry, Claire. I wish I had the money to help. I wish any of us did." "I know. It's okay." "It ain't okay. None of this is okay." "No," Claire agreed. "It's not." Footsteps in the hallway. Rowan quickly stepped back from her door as her mother entered. "Ready, baby?" Rowan nodded, shouldering her backpack. Claire walked her down the hall to Mrs. Patterson's apartment. The elderly woman stood in the doorway, face creased with worry. "You be good," Claire told Rowan, kneeling one last time. "And remember what I said. Stay here, no matter what. Mom." "I love you, Rowan, more than anything in this world." Then she was gone, walking back toward their apartment with her shoulders squared like she was heading into battle. Mrs. Patterson guided Rowan inside and locked the door. Through the walls, Rowan heard her mother return to their apartment, heard the door close, heard the locks click into place, and then, 15 minutes later, she heard the heavy footsteps, 4 sets, maybe 5, climbing the stairs, stopping at apartment 3C. The knock that followed wasn't polite. It was a demand. The knock came again, harder this time. Rowan pressed her ear against Mrs. Patterson's door, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Get away from there, child." Mrs. Patterson's wrinkled hand touched her shoulder, gentle but firm. "I need to hear." "No, you don't." The old woman tried to pull her back, but Rowan resisted, feet planted. Through the thin walls and door, she heard her mother's voice. "I know I'm late. I'm sorry. I just need a little more time." A man's voice responded low, measured, almost pleasant. The one with the scar. Time's up, Claire. That's why we're here. Please, I have $73. It's not all of it, but it's everything I have. Take it. I'll get you the rest next week, I swear. $73. A pause. You're short $267. And you think we're going to accept a partial payment after 3 extensions? I'm sick. I lost my job. I'm trying. Everyone's trying, Claire. Everyone's got a sob story. But you know what? Everyone else still pays. Rowan's hands curled into fists. I'll get it, her mother said, voice rising. I just need more time. 1 more week. Please. We gave you weeks. 3 of them. Plus late fees you ignored. You think this is a charity? I think you're human beings who can show a little compassion. The sound of something hitting the wall cut her off. A hand slamming beside her mother's head. Maybe. Or worse. Mrs. Patterson's grip on Rowan's shoulder tightened. Compassion. The man's voice had lost its pleasant edge. You want to talk about compassion? How about the compassion we showed when we didn't break your legs the first time you missed a payment? How about the compassion we're showing right now by having a conversation instead of making an example out of you? I have a daughter. I know you have a daughter. Sweet kid. Rowan, right? About 7 years old? The temperature in Mrs. Patterson's apartment seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rowan felt ice spread through her veins. Don't. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. Please don't. Don't what? Don't mention that you're a mother? That you've got responsibilities? Because see, that's exactly why you should have figured this out, Claire. That's why you should have done whatever it took to get our money. I tried everything. Not everything. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. There's always options. You're not a bad-looking woman. There's plenty of ways to earn money fast in this neighborhood. Silence. Then her mother's voice, shaking with rage. Get out of my house. A laugh, cold and sharp. Or what? Get out. You don't give orders anymore, Claire. You lost that privilege when you decided our money was optional. Footsteps. Movement. The scrape of furniture. Let go of me. Sit down. I said let go. The sound of a slap echoed through the walls. Rowan flinched as if she'd been struck herself. Mrs. Patterson's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Lord. Mom! Rowan screamed, lunging for the door. Mrs. Patterson caught her around the waist, yanking her back. No, baby. No. Let me go. They're hurting her. If you go out there, you'll make it worse. The old woman's voice cracked. She told you to stay here. You promised. Rowan struggled, tears streaming down her face. I don't care. I don't care about promises. That's my mom. Through the wall, the man's voice continued, calm again. Controlled. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give us everything valuable in this apartment. Jewelry, electronics, anything we can sell. Then you're going to sign over your next 2 paychecks to us. And then maybe we'll call it even. I already gave you everything. Claire's voice was thick. There's nothing left. Then I guess we have a problem. Please. You know what I think, Claire? I think you need a reminder of how things work around here. I think you've forgotten who's in charge. I haven't forgotten. Clearly you have. Otherwise you would have found our money. You would have borrowed it, stolen it, sold whatever you had to sell. But instead, you sat here feeling sorry for yourself, thinking the rules didn't apply to you. That's not... Shut up. The words were quiet but absolute. I'm done listening to excuses. You had 3 weeks. You had multiple warnings. You had every opportunity to make this right. And you failed. A long pause. Then, so now you're going to learn what happens when people fail to pay us. No, wait. The sound of a scuffle. A cry of pain. Rowan was screaming now, writhing in Mrs. Patterson's arms. Mom. Mom. The old woman was crying too, holding Rowan with strength born of desperation. Please, baby. Please calm down. Your mama wouldn't want. I don't care what she wants. The apartment next door had gone quiet. Too quiet. Then her mother's voice, barely audible. Rowan can't see this. Please. Whatever you're going to do, just let me send her away first. She's already gone, isn't she? A pause. Smart move. Shows you're not completely stupid. Please don't do this. You did this, Claire. You made the choice when you didn't pay. Now you deal with the consequences. Rowan heard her mother start to cry deep. Hopeless sobs that broke something fundamental inside her chest. I'm sorry, Claire whispered. I'm so sorry. I tried. I really tried. Sorry doesn't pay debts. Mrs. Patterson was pulling Rowan away from the door now, dragging her toward the bedroom. You can't listen to this, child. You can't. But Rowan heard it anyway. Heard her mother's screams. Heard the crashes. Heard things breaking. Heard the world ending in apartment 3C while she stood helpless in 4B, held back by an old woman who meant well but didn't understand. Didn't understand that every second Rowan stayed here was a second her mother was alone, a second she was being hurt. A second Rowan was breaking her promise to herself, the real promise, the one that mattered, the promise that she would never let anything happen to her mom. The screaming stopped. The apartment went silent. Rowan's whole body went numb. "Mom?" she whispered. No answer. "Mom?" Nothing. Mrs. Patterson was crying openly now, still holding Rowan, both of them frozen. Then footsteps. Heavy boots in the hallway. Multiple sets, moving toward the stairs, descending. Gone. Rowan tore free from Mrs. Patterson's grip and ran. "Rowan, wait!" But she was already out the door, sprinting down the hall, her small hands fumbling with the knob to apartment 3C, locked. "Mom! Mom!" She pounded on the door with both fists. "Please open the door, Mom!" "And please." Silence. Mrs. Patterson caught up, breathing hard, pulling a key from her pocket with shaking hands. "Claire gave me a spare," she said. In case. She couldn't finish. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Rowan saw the overturned table, the broken lamp, the scattered papers, and her mother, curled on the floor, not moving, blood on her lip, bruises already forming. "Mom!" Rowan dropped to her knees, hands hovering, afraid to touch, afraid not to. Claire's eyes fluttered open, focused on her daughter. "I told you to stay," she whispered. "I don't care." Rowan's tears fell onto her mother's face. "I don't care about staying. I care about you." Claire tried to smile, failed. "I'm okay, baby." "You're not okay. Look at you. I'm alive. That's what matters." But Rowan knew better. Being alive wasn't enough. Not when they'd be back. Not when this would happen again. Not when her mother was lying on the floor bleeding because Rowan was too small, too weak, too powerless to stop it. Mrs. Patterson was already on the phone, calling for an ambulance, but Rowan barely heard her. She was staring at her mother's broken face, at the wreckage of their home, at the future she could see stretching ahead, endless and dark and impossible. And she was making a different promise, a promise to find someone who could help, someone strong enough, someone dangerous enough, someone who wouldn't be afraid of the men who did this. She'd seen him once, months ago, outside the bodega, a man in an expensive suit with cold eyes and tattoos creeping up his neck. She'd watched him stop 3 men from beating a teenager, watched him do it with nothing but words and presence, watched everyone scatter when he spoke. She didn't know his name, but she knew where to find him, and she knew he was her only hope. The memory was 4 months old, but Rowan remembered it like yesterday. She'd been walking home from school, taking the long route to avoid the men who sometimes stood on the corner of Morrison and 5th. It was safer to add 10 minutes to her walk than risk passing them when they were drinking and bored. The bodega on Lexington Street had become her halfway point, a place to catch her breath, buy a piece of candy if she'd saved enough coins, and feel almost normal for a few minutes. That Thursday afternoon, she'd been counting change in her palm when the shouting started. 3 men had a teenager cornered against the brick wall beside the store. The kid couldn't have been more than 16, skinny, scared, backing up until he had nowhere left to go. "You think you can sell on our corner?" one of them was saying, shoving the kid's shoulder. "You think you don't have to pay us?" "I wasn't selling anything, I swear." "Don't lie to us, punk." Rowan had frozen near the entrance, too frightened to move, too horrified to look away. The men were circling now. Predators who'd found easy prey. One of them cracked his knuckles. "Maybe we need to send a message. Let everyone know what happens when you disrespect us." The teenager's eyes went wide with panic. Then a car door slammed. Everyone's heads turned. A man stepped out of a midnight blue Bentley parked at the curb, expensive suit, slicked back dark hair, tattoos visible on his neck and hands. He moved with a kind of controlled grace that reminded Rowan of the big cats she'd seen in nature documentaries. Unhurried, confident, dangerous. 2 other men exited the car behind him, both built like walls. The 3 men cornering the teenager suddenly looked uncertain. "We got a problem here?" The man in the suit's voice was quiet, calm, but it carried weight that made everyone stop breathing. The largest of the 3 men puffed up his chest. "Nothing that concerns you. We're just handling some business." "Doesn't look like business. Looks like 3 grown men beating up a kid. He was selling on our corner." "Your corner?" The suited man stepped closer. "Funny. I thought this was neutral territory. Public street. No one's corner. We run this block." "You don't run anything." The words were flat, final. You collect pocket change from people too scared to fight back. That's not running territory. That's being a parasite. The tension crackled like lightning about to strike. One of the three men reached for something in his jacket. The two walls behind the suited man moved not fast, not aggressive, just a subtle shift in stance that said try it and see what happens. The man's hand froze. Here's what's going to happen, the suited man said conversationally. You're going to apologize to this young man for wasting his time. Then you're going to walk away, and you're going to remember that hassling kids on public streets is bad for everyone's business, including mine. Who the hell do you think you are? The man smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Someone you don't want to know. A long moment passed. Then, incredibly, the three men stepped back, muttered something that might have been an apology, and walked away, shooting dark looks over their shoulders but not daring to escalate further. The teenager sagged against the wall, breathing hard. The suited man turned to him. You okay? Yeah, thank you. I wasn't selling anything. I swear. I was just waiting for my sister. I believe you. He pulled a business card from his pocket. You ever have real trouble? The kind that won't walk away? You call that number. Understand? The kid nodded, taking the card with shaking hands. Good. Now go home. The teenager ran, and the man turned, catching Rowan's gaze where she stood pressed against the bodega's brick wall, still frozen. Their eyes met for maybe 3 seconds. She expected him to look cruel, mean, like the men who came to her apartment, but his expression was unreadable. Not kind exactly, but not monstrous either, just powerful, in control, like nothing in the world could touch him. Then he got back in his car and drove away. Rowan had asked Mrs. Patterson about him later that night. The man in the fancy car who stopped those guys from hurting someone? Mrs. Patterson had gone very still. You saw Baptiste Paris? Is that his name? Child, you stay away from that man. He's dangerous. But he helped. He helps when it suits him. But he's not a hero, Rowan. He's a gangster. A criminal. He runs half this city, and he don't do it by being nice. But he stopped those men from hurting that boy. Maybe. This time. But don't confuse one good deed with a good man. Rowan had nodded like she understood. But she'd remembered him anyway. Remembered the way everyone had scattered when he spoke. Remembered the power in his silence. Remembered thinking, that's what safety looks like. Now, kneeling on the pavement in front of that same man 4 months later, offering him her last $5, Rowan understood why she'd come to him. Because the police didn't care. Because her neighbors couldn't help. Because every adult in her life was just as powerless as she was. But Baptiste Paris wasn't powerless. He was exactly the opposite. You said you saw me before, Baptiste said, studying her face. When? 4 months ago. Outside the bodega. You stopped some men from hurting a teenager. Something flickered in his expression. Recognition, maybe. You remember that? I remember everything about it. Rowan's voice steadied. You made them leave with just words. They were scared of you. They were smart. The men who hurt my mom aren't smart. They came back even after she begged them not to. They didn't care that she's sick. They didn't care about anything except money. Baptiste's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. They said they'd come back. Rowan continued, words tumbling faster now. They said next time they'd take me, to make sure my mom pays. They said little girls are worth a lot of money to the right people. Behind Baptiste, one of his men, the bald one, swore under his breath. Baptiste's eyes went hard as stone. They threatened to sell you? They didn't say it exactly like that. But I understood. I'm 7, not stupid. No, Baptiste said quietly. You're definitely not stupid. He stood slowly, the $5 bill still in his hand, and looked toward the apartment building behind her. Calculation crossed his features. Internal decisions being weighed. These men, he said. They come on a schedule? Tuesdays and Fridays, 9 o'clock. Today's Friday. Yes. And they've already been here tonight? Rowan nodded, her throat tight. An hour ago. They hurt my mom bad. The ambulance took her to the hospital. Mrs. Patterson is with her. So who's watching you? Nobody. I ran away when Mrs. Patterson was talking to the paramedics. I had to find you before they came back. Baptiste's expression darkened. They're coming back tonight? They always come back when they don't get all the money, to make it worse. Rowan's hands clenched into fists. And my mom can't fight anymore. She's too hurt, too tired. They'll. Her voice broke. Baptiste crouched again, bringing himself back to her level. Look at me, Rowan. She met his eyes. I need you to understand something. What you're asking me to do, interfering in another operation's territory, it's complicated. It starts wars, costs lives, changes everything. I know. Do you? Because this isn't like the movies. People don't just walk away when someone bigger shows up. They fight back, they retaliate, and sometimes innocent people get hurt in the crossfire. People are already getting hurt, Rowan said, voice stronger now. My mom, Mrs. Chen. The lady in 1A who disappeared last month. The teenager you saved. We're already in a war. We're just losing because nobody fights back. Baptiste stared at her. She held his gaze, refusing to look away. You said you don't involve children in business, she continued. Mrs. Patterson told me. But I'm already involved. I've been involved my whole life. So has every kid in this building. We just don't have a choice about it. Silence stretched between them. Then Baptiste did something unexpected. He smiled. Just a fraction. Almost invisible. You're a brave kid, Rowan Moore. I'm a scared kid who's out of options. Same thing sometimes. He stood again, pocketing the $5. Wait here. He walked to his car, leaned through the window, and spoke quietly to the driver, then returned. My men are going to take you to the hospital. You'll stay with your mother until I handle this. Rowan's heart leapt. You're going to help? I'm going to look into it. That's not the same. It's what I'm offering. His voice was firm. I don't make promises I can't keep. So I'm promising to investigate. To see who these men are and what kind of mess I'd be stepping into. Then I'll decide. It wasn't what she wanted to hear, but it was more than anyone else had offered. Okay, Rowan whispered. Good. Baptiste gestured toward the car. Go. She started to walk away, then stopped. Turned back. Mr. Paris? Yeah? Thank you for not walking away. His expression softened. Just barely. Get in the car, kid. Rowan climbed into the Bentley, and the door closed behind her with a soft, expensive sound. Through the window, she watched Baptiste pull out his phone, already making calls, and for the first time in months, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Baptiste Paris didn't make impulsive decisions. Every move he'd made for 12 years had been calculated, risks weighed, consequences considered, exit strategies planned. It's how he'd survived in a business where most men didn't see their 40th birthday. But as he watched his Bentley pull away with a 7-year-old girl in the back seat, he felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Anger. Not the cold, professional anger he used as a tool. This was different. Hotter. Personal. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Dimitri. I need information on the protection racket running Riverside Apartments. Who's running it? How many men? What their structure looks like. I want it in 20 minutes. He hung up before his lieutenant could ask questions. The second call went to his driver. Take the girl to Mercy General. Stay with her and her mother until you hear from me. Anyone tries to approach them, you stop it. Understand? Yes, sir. Baptiste pocketed his phone and looked up at the Riverside complex. Broken windows, graffiti, the smell of poverty and desperation thick in the air. This wasn't his territory. Never had been. The smart play was to walk away, send the girl some money anonymously, maybe arrange for her mother to get medical care, keep his hands clean and his borders intact. But he kept seeing Rowan's face, the bruise under her eye, the way she'd held out that $5 bill like it was everything. They said little girls are worth a lot of money to the right people. His jaw tightened. Dimitri called back in 15 minutes. It's the Alvarez crew, his lieutenant said. 4 main enforcers led by a guy named Ricky Salazar. Scar down his neck. Real piece of work. They've been running protection on that block for 3 years. Small-time operation, they clear maybe 15 grand a month extorting women and shop owners. Alvarez. Baptiste recognized the name. Eduardo Alvarez. Yeah. He runs the whole South End now. Took it over after the Koreans pulled out. This building is just one of maybe 20 revenue streams he's got going. Baptiste processed this. Eduardo Alvarez was nobody, a mid-level operator who'd gotten lucky when bigger players abandoned territory. But he had numbers. 30, maybe 40 men. Enough to cause problems if pushed. You thinking about stepping in? Dimitri asked carefully. I'm thinking about having a conversation. Boss, that's not our territory. We start interfering in Alvarez's operations. I know what it means. Baptiste's voice was cold. Get me Salazar's phone number, and find out where he and his crew drink. You sure about this? Just do it. 20 minutes later, Baptiste had what he needed. Ricky Salazar and his men spent most Friday nights at a dive bar called Mickey's, 6 blocks from Riverside. Baptiste didn't call ahead, didn't announce himself. Just drove there with Cole and Dimitri flanking him. Walked through the front door at 10:15, and let the silence spread through the room like a disease. The bar went quiet. Ricky Salazar sat in a back booth with 3 other men, cards spread on the table between them. He looked up, registered who'd just walked in, and his face went carefully neutral. Baptiste Paris. Salazar set down his cards slowly. Long way from your territory. Need to have a word. About? Riverside Apartments. Apartment 3C specifically. Salazar's eyes narrowed. That's our building. I know. That's why I'm here. The other men at the table shifted, hands drifting toward waistbands. Baptiste's men mirrored the movement, but he raised one hand slightly. Everyone froze. This doesn't have to be complicated, Baptiste said, walking closer. I just want to have a conversation. We got nothing to talk about. I think we do. Baptiste stopped at the edge of the booth. Woman named Claire Moore. You and your boys put her in the hospital tonight. Salazar shrugged. She didn't pay. 3 weeks late, multiple warnings. That's business. She was sick, lost her job, had a 7-year-old daughter. Not my problem. It is now. Baptiste pulled an envelope from his inside pocket and tossed it on the table. $5,000. More than enough to cover what she owes plus penalties. Take it and leave her alone. Salazar stared at the envelope like it was a snake. Why do you care about some woman in our building? I don't. I care about the precedent of grown men threatening to traffic children. The temperature in the room dropped. Salazar's face darkened. We never said. The girl heard you. Little girls are worth a lot of money to the right people. Ring any bells? That was just talk. To scare her mom into paying. Doesn't matter. You said it. To a 7-year-old. Baptiste's voice was ice. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take that money, mark Claire Moore's debt as paid, and you're never going to contact her or her daughter again. Ever. Salazar laughed harsh and bitter. You think you can just walk into our territory and start giving orders? I'm not giving orders. I'm making an offer. 5,000 for maybe 300 in debt. That's good business. It's disrespect is what it is. Salazar stood, his men rising with him. You don't run South End. Alvarez does. And we don't take orders from you. It's not an order. It's a courtesy. Courtesy? Salazar stepped closer. You want to show courtesy? Stay in your own territory. This building, these people, they're ours. We've been collecting from them for 3 years. You think we're going to let some outsider come in and undermine our authority? I think you're going to take $5,000 for a debt worth 300 and consider it a gift. And if we don't? Baptiste's expression didn't change. Then I'll make it my business to shut down every operation you've got running in South End. Every gambling house, every protection racket, every street corner. I'll do it systematically until Eduardo Alvarez himself comes asking what he needs to do to make me stop. The threat hung in the air. Salazar's face flushed red. You're threatening war over one woman? I'm offering peace. You're the one making it complicated. This is our territory, our people, our money. Salazar's hand moved toward his waistband. You got no right. Cole and Dimitri moved instantly, weapons appearing in their hands with practiced efficiency. The other men in the booth went for their guns. Baptiste didn't move, didn't even blink. Think very carefully about your next move, he said quietly. Because once this starts, it doesn't stop until one of us is gone. Is Claire Moore's $300 debt really worth dying over? Salazar's hand hovered. His men waited for his signal. The entire bar held its breath. Then Salazar's lips curled into a sneer. You know what? Keep your money. We don't need charity from you. But that woman, she's ours until her debt is paid. And if her kid wants to get involved, that's on her. Wrong answer. This is our territory, Paris. You want to start a war over it? That's your funeral. But don't pretend this is about justice or protecting kids. This is about you thinking you can push into our operations whenever you feel like it. Baptiste held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. He turned and walked toward the door, his men backing up to cover him. Salazar called after him. That's it? You're just leaving? Baptiste paused at the threshold. I made you a fair offer. You refused. That's your choice. Damn right it is. Then we have nothing else to discuss. Baptiste looked back over his shoulder. Enjoy your evening, gentlemen. He walked out into the cold night air. Cole caught up to him at the car. Boss, they're not going to back down. I know. So what's the play? Baptiste opened the car door, his face unreadable. I tried peace. They chose war. You're really going to do this? Over one woman and her kid? Baptiste slid into the back seat. Go to the warehouse. Round up everyone we've got on call tonight. Full crew. How many? All of them. Dimitri leaned through the driver's window. What are we doing, boss? Baptiste's eyes were cold, hard, the look of a man who'd just made an irrevocable decision. We're going to show Eduardo Alvarez what happens when his people threaten children in my city. Your city? This isn't even your territory. It is now. The Bentley pulled away from Mickey's bar, leaving Ricky Salazar and his men celebrating their victory inside. They had no idea that in 3 hours, their entire world would collapse, and that the man they just dismissed had crossed a line he'd sworn never to cross, all because a little girl had the courage to ask the most dangerous man she knew for help, and he'd said yes. Baptiste sat in the back of his Bentley, watching the city lights blur past the window. He should have been strategizing, planning the assault, coordinating his crews. But his mind kept drifting to a memory he'd buried 25 years ago. A different city, a different life, a different little boy. Baptiste had been 9 years old when his father was killed, shot in a territorial dispute that had nothing to do with him. Collateral damage in someone else's war. His mother had tried to hold things together, working 3 jobs to keep their apartment, to keep Baptiste fed and in school. But the men who controlled their neighborhood saw opportunity in a widow struggling alone. First came the protection fees, then the interest on debts she'd never taken, then threats when she couldn't pay, then violence when threats weren't enough. Baptiste remembered the sound of his mother crying behind the locked bathroom door, remembered her bruises that she tried to hide with makeup, remembered the way she flinched whenever someone knocked. He'd been powerless then, small, weak, unable to protect the one person who mattered most, until the night they came for her. He'd hidden in the closet like she'd told him to, had pressed his hands over his ears to block out the sounds, had squeezed his eyes shut and prayed to a God he wasn't sure existed. When it was over, his mother had pulled herself together, cleaned up the blood, and told him everything was fine. But Baptiste had seen the truth in her eyes. It wasn't fine. It would never be fine. 2 weeks later, she was gone, not dead worse. Disappeared into the system of debt and exploitation that ground women up and spit out nothing but ghosts. He'd been sent to foster care. She'd been sent somewhere he couldn't follow. He never saw her again. Baptiste had spent the next 15 years crawling out of that hole, learning the rules, getting strong, building power, creating a world where no one could touch him, hurt him, or take anything that mattered. He'd sworn he'd never be that powerless boy again, and he'd succeeded. But in the process, he'd become something else, something harder, something that looked at suffering and made calculated decisions about whether it was profitable to care. Until tonight, until a 7-year-old girl with a $5 bill reminded him of who he used to be. The Bentley pulled up to the warehouse on the industrial waterfront, a nondescript building that served as Baptiste's base of operations. Inside, 20 men were already gathering, summoned by Dimitri's calls. Baptiste stepped out of the car, buttoning his jacket. Cole fell into step beside him. Boss, I need to say this before we go in there. Say it. This is a mistake. Strategically, financially, every way that matters, this is a mistake. Baptiste kept walking. Alvarez has 40 men, Cole continued. We hit his operation. He'll retaliate. Could be weeks of back-and-forth violence. Civilians could get caught in the crossfire. Police might actually pay attention for once. And for what? One woman who means nothing to our business? Baptiste stopped at the warehouse door. You finished? No. I need you to tell me what this is really about. Because I've worked for you for 8 years, and I've never seen you make a decision like this. Like what? Emotional. The word hung between them. Baptiste turned to face his lieutenant fully. You remember why you came to work for me? Cole blinked at the non sequitur. What? 8 years ago. You were running errands for the Koreans. I offered you a job. You remember why you took it? Because you paid better. No. I asked you that night, why are you in this business? You know what you said? Cole was quiet. You said because someone has to protect my neighborhood. Might as well be me. Baptiste's gaze was steady. You said the Koreans were parasites, that they took everything and gave nothing back, that you wanted to work for someone who understood the difference between power and cruelty. I was young, idealistic. You were right. Baptiste stepped closer. I built my operation on that principle. We don't prey on the weak. We don't traffic kids. We don't terrorize women who can't fight back. That's not power, that's cowardice. And I will not tolerate it in my city. This isn't your city. It's Alvarez's territory. Not after tonight. Cole stared at him. You're really going to start a war over this? I'm going to end one. Baptiste pushed open the warehouse door. The question is whether you're with me or not. Inside, 20 men stood waiting. Enforcers, soldiers, the core of Baptiste's operation. They ranged in age from early 20s to late 50s, all of them hardened by violence, all of them loyal. They knew when Baptiste called everyone in, it meant something serious. The room went silent as he entered. Baptiste walked to the center, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Dimitri stood off to the side with a tablet, ready to coordinate. "Most of you know I have rules," Baptiste began, his voice carrying to every corner. "Rules about how we operate, how we make money, what we do and don't tolerate." Nods around the room. "One of those rules is we don't involve children. We don't prey on the weak. We don't become the kind of men we'd kill if we met them in an alley." He paused. "Tonight I found out that Eduardo Alvarez's crew has been violating every single one of those principles." He told them about Rowan, about Claire, about the systematic extortion of women in Riverside, about the threats. "This isn't our territory," he acknowledged. "Interfering means crossing lines, starting conflicts, maybe starting a war." Some of the men shifted uncomfortably. "So I'm giving you a choice." Baptiste looked at each man in turn. "If you don't want to be part of this, walk away now. No hard feelings, no consequences. This operation is personal, and I won't force anyone into it." No one moved. "Last chance," Baptiste said. Still, no one left. A smile ghosted across Baptiste's face. "Then let's talk about how this works." Dimitri stepped forward with the tablet. "Alvarez's crew operates out of 4 main locations: Mickey's Bar, where the enforcers drink; a gambling house on 7th Street, a storage facility they use for collections; and Alvarez's personal office above a check-cashing place on Morrison." Baptiste nodded. "We hit all 4 simultaneously. Fast, clean, overwhelming force. The goal isn't to kill anyone, it's to dismantle the operation so completely they can't function." "What about Alvarez himself?" someone asked. "He gets a message. Not violence, a message. I want him to understand that what happened tonight is the cost of threatening children, and that if it happens again, I won't be this merciful." "And Salazar? The guy who actually hurt the woman?" Baptiste's expression went cold. "Salazar made his choice at Mickey's. He'll face the consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that makes sure he never threatens another child." The men understood. Some looked troubled. Most just nodded. "Equipment check in 5 minutes, Dimitri said. "We roll out at 11:30. Synchronized strikes at midnight." The crew dispersed to prepare. Cole approached Baptiste. "You sure about this, boss? Once we cross this line, there's no going back." "I crossed the line the moment I took that little girl's $5. Baptiste's jaw set. "Now I'm just following through. This isn't like you." "Maybe it should have been." Baptiste looked at his lieutenant. "How many Rowans are out there, Cole? How many kids getting crushed by systems we ignore because it's not profitable to care? We can't save everyone." "No. But we can save this one. And we can send a message that says some things aren't acceptable. Not in my city." "It's not your city." Baptiste's smile was sharp. "It will be by morning." At 11:15, the warehouse emptied. 4 teams, 5 men each, loaded into unmarked vehicles. Baptiste rode with the team heading to Mickey's Bar, where Ricky Salazar was probably still celebrating his victory over the man he'd dismissed. As they drove through the dark streets, Baptiste thought about the boy he'd been, hiding in a closet while his mother was hurt, powerless, afraid, broken, and he thought about Rowan, standing in front of him with a crumpled $5 bill, asking the most dangerous man she knew to save her mother. The difference between them was simple. Rowan had found someone who could help. Baptiste never had, but he could be that person for her now, even if it cost him everything. His phone buzzed. "Dimitri, all teams in position. Waiting on your signal." Baptiste looked at his watch. 11:58 p.m. He typed back. "On my mark, midnight sharp." The seconds ticked down. Baptiste Paris had built an empire on rules, on boundaries, on never letting emotion override strategy. Tonight, he was breaking all of them. For a little girl who dared to believe he was worth $5 and a prayer, his watch hit midnight. He sent the message, "Go," and the night exploded. The first team hit the storage facility at exactly midnight. 5 men entered through the back door, moving with military precision. The 2 guards inside barely had time to register what was happening before they were on the ground, zip-tied and silent. Dimitri's voice crackled through Baptiste's earpiece. "Storage secure. Ledgers acquired. Good. Hold position." The second team breached the gambling house on 7th Street. 15 civilians scattered as Baptiste's men swept through, confiscating cash boxes and hard drives. No shots fired, no casualties, just overwhelming, efficient force. "Gambling house clear," came the report. Lock it down. The third team surrounded Alvarez's office on Morrison. They didn't break down the door, just posted guards at every exit and waited. Eduardo Alvarez wasn't there, but his second-in-command was. The man took one look at the firepower outside and wisely chose to make a phone call instead of a stand. Baptiste's phone rang 30 seconds later. Paris. Eduardo Alvarez's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Good evening, Eduardo. I tried to handle this quietly. By invading my territory? By offering to pay a debt your men refused. This is the alternative. You're starting a war. No, I'm ending an extortion ring. There's a difference." Alvarez sputtered. "You can't just... It's already done. Your storage facility is empty. Your gambling house is closed. Your office is surrounded. And in about 2 minutes, your boys at Mickey's are going to have a very bad night. If you touch my men, I'm not touching them. I'm removing them. Permanently. From the business of terrorizing women and threatening children." Baptiste's car pulled up outside Mickey's bar. Through the windows, he could see Ricky Salazar and his crew still playing cards, laughing, completely unaware. "Here's what's going to happen, Eduardo," Baptiste said, stepping out of the vehicle. "Your protection racket at Riverside Apartments is done. Finished. Those women don't pay you anymore. They're under my protection now. That's my building. Not anymore. You can fight me over it, which will cost you everything you've built in South End. Or you can write it off as the price of employing men stupid enough to threaten to traffic children." Silence on the line. "I know you didn't order that," Baptiste continued, his voice softening slightly. "I know Salazar went off script, but he works for you, which makes it your responsibility. So what, you're taking my territory as punishment? 1 building. 20 units. Maybe 15 grand a year in revenue. That's the cost, Eduardo. Compared to what I could take, it's generous." More silence. Baptiste reached the door of Mickey's. His men were in position, front, back, side exits, all covered. "You have 10 seconds to decide," Baptiste said. "Fight me and lose everything, or give me Riverside and walk away with the rest of your operation intact." He could hear Alvarez breathing hard on the other end. 5 seconds. "You're insane." 3 seconds. Fine. Take the building. But this isn't over, Paris." "Yes, it is." Baptiste ended the call and nodded to Cole. His lieutenant kicked open the door. Ricky Salazar looked up from his cards to see Baptiste Paris walk through the entrance with 10 armed men behind him. The color drained from his face. "Evening, Ricky," Baptiste said pleasantly. "Remember me?" Salazar lunged for his weapon. So did his 3 companions. They never reached them. Baptiste's men moved like a machine, disarming, controlling, subduing. Within 15 seconds, all 4 were on the ground. Hands zip-tied behind their backs, the bartender wisely ducked behind the counter. The few remaining patrons ran for the exits. Baptiste walked slowly to where Salazar lay face down on the floor, Cole's boot on his back. "I gave you a choice," Baptiste said quietly. "Peace or war? You chose war. Go to hell." Cole increased the pressure. Salazar grunted in pain. Baptiste crouched down. "Claire Moore is off limits. Her daughter is off limits. Every woman in Riverside is off limits. You understand? You can't protect them all. I don't have to. I just have to make sure everyone knows what happens to men who touch them." He stood, looking at his men. "Take them to the warehouse. I want them held until morning. Then I want them driven to the county line and released with a message. South End doesn't tolerate predators anymore." "What about Salazar?" Baptiste looked down at the man who'd hurt Claire, who'd threatened Rowan, who'd laughed when offered peace. "Salazar gets special treatment. Break both his hands. Make sure he can never hurt another woman." Salazar's eyes went wide. "You can't." "I can. And I am." Baptiste turned away. "Be grateful I'm letting you live." By 2 a.m., it was over. 4 locations secured, $32,000 in cash seized, hard drives containing years of extortion records confiscated, 14 of Alvarez's men detained and processed, and 1 building, Riverside Apartments, permanently removed from Eduardo Alvarez's control. Baptiste stood outside the complex as his men finished their sweep. Lights were coming on in windows, residents peering out, wondering what the commotion was about. Dimitri approached with a folder. "The ledgers from storage. You need to see this." Baptiste flipped through the pages. Names, addresses, amounts. 3 years of systematic exploitation documented in neat columns. Mrs. Chen in 2B, $4,800 paid over 18 months. The woman in 1A who disappeared, $6,200 before she'd vanished. Claire Moore. $5,040 over 3 years, dozens of others, hundreds of thousands of dollars extracted from women who had nothing. Baptiste's jaw tightened. What do you want to do with it? Dimitri asked. Burn it. All of it. These women don't owe anyone anything anymore. And the money we seized? Baptiste thought for a moment. Divided among the residents. Anonymous donations. Call it reparations. Dimitri nodded and walked away. Cole appeared at Baptiste's side. It's done, boss. Building secure. Alvarez has been informed this territory is no longer his. Good. You know this isn't over, right? He'll look for ways to hit back. Let him try. Baptiste's voice was steel. I want every crew in the city to know what happened here tonight. I want them to know that threatening children costs more than they can afford to pay. You think one night changes anything? Baptiste looked up at the building. At the lights in the windows. At the women who'd spent years living in fear finally able to breathe. For them it does, he said quietly. And that's enough. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Girl is asking for you. Says she needs to know her mother is safe. Baptiste read it twice. I need to go, he told Cole. Finish securing the building. Post men at every entrance for the next 72 hours. Nobody from Alvarez's crew gets within a block. Where are you going? To keep a promise. Mercy General Hospital was quiet at 3 a.m. Baptiste walked through the main entrance, still wearing his suit, now slightly disheveled from the night's work. The security guard at the desk looked up, recognized danger when he saw it, and wisely looked back down. He found room 347 on the 3rd floor. Through the window, he could see Claire Moore sleeping, her face bruised and swollen, IV drips running into her arm. Beside the bed, curled in a chair far too big for her, was Rowan. She wasn't sleeping. When Baptiste opened the door, her head snapped up. Their eyes met. She untangled herself from the chair and ran to him. He barely had time to crouch before she crashed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck, her whole body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for hours. Baptiste froze. He wasn't used to this, to being the person someone ran toward instead of away from, to being trusted instead of feared. His arms came up slowly, awkwardly, and he held her. It's okay, he said quietly. You're safe. Your mother's safe. They said she might not wake up. She will. The doctors say she'll be fine. Rowan pulled back, tears streaming down her face. Did you stop them? The bad men? Yes. All of them? All of them. They won't come back. Ever. She searched his face, needing to believe it. Promise? I promise. A sob of relief escaped her. She buried her face in his shoulder again. Behind them, a weak voice said, Rowan, been holding back for hours. Baptiste froze. He wasn't used to this, to being the person someone ran toward instead of away from, to being trusted instead of feared. His arms came up slowly, awkwardly, and he held her. It's okay, he said quietly. You're safe. Your mother's safe. They said she might not wake up. She will. The doctors say she'll be fine. Rowan pulled back, tears streaming down her face. Did you stop them? The bad men? Yes. All of them? All of them. They won't come back. Ever. She searched his face, needing to believe it. Promise? I promise. A sob of relief escaped her. She buried her face in his shoulder again. Behind them, a weak voice said, Rowan? They both turned. Claire Moore's eyes were open, struggling to focus. When she saw her daughter, relief flooded her features. When she saw Baptiste, confusion followed. Who? Mom? Rowan ran to the bed, taking her mother's hand carefully. Claire winced but managed to smile. Baby, I'm okay. I'm right here. I was so scared. You wouldn't wake up, and the doctors said, Shh, I'm fine. Claire's gaze drifted to Baptiste, standing near the door. Who is this? This is Mr. Paris, Rowan said. He's the one I told you about, the one who helped. Understanding dawned slowly in Claire's eyes. You're the man she gave the $5 to. Baptiste nodded. And you actually... Claire's voice caught. You actually came? I did. Why? It was a fair question. One Baptiste had asked himself a dozen times tonight. Because your daughter was brave enough to ask, he said simply. And because no child should have to live in fear. Tears spilled down Claire's cheeks. I don't understand. We're nobody. We have nothing to offer you. You don't need to offer me anything. It's done. But those men they work for, they don't work for anyone anymore. Their operation is finished. Riverside is under my protection now. Claire stared at him. I don't know what that means. It means no one collects from you anymore. No more payments. No more threats. You and Rowan are safe. For how long? Permanently. The word hung in the air. Claire started crying harder deep, shuddering sobs of relief that had been building for years. Rowan climbed carefully onto the bed, holding her mother while she broke. Baptiste turned to leave, giving them privacy. Wait, Rowan called. He stopped. She climbed down from the bed and walked to him, digging in her pocket. When her hand emerged, she was holding the crumpled $5 bill. This is yours, she said, offering it up. You earned it. Baptiste looked at the money, at this child who'd offered him everything she had because she believed he could help. He knelt down one more time. Keep it, he said gently. Buy yourself something nice. Maybe ice cream when your mom gets out. But you saved us. You should. I got paid enough. He closed her small fingers around the bill. That $5 is worth more to you than any amount of money is to me. So you keep it. Remember what it bought. What did it buy? Hope, courage, a future. He stood. That's worth everything. Rowan looked at the bill, then back at him. Then she did something unexpected. She hugged him again. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not walking away. Baptiste's chest tightened. You're welcome, Rowan Moore. He gently extracted himself and walked to the door. Mr. Paris? He turned back. Claire was watching him, tears still streaming. I don't know how to repay you. Live, Baptiste said. Take care of your daughter. Get better. That's payment enough. I will. I promise. Baptiste nodded and left. Baptiste stood in the hospital parking lot as dawn broke over the city. His phone had been buzzing nonstop, reports from his crews, messages from contacts, 3 voicemails from Eduardo Alvarez that he hadn't bothered listening to. The night's work was done. Riverside was secure. Rowan and Claire were safe. But something had shifted inside him. Something he couldn't quite name. Dimitri pulled up in the Bentley. Baptiste slid into the back seat. Where to, boss? Where to, boss? Home. They drove in silence for several blocks. The men are talking, Dimitri finally said. About? About what happened tonight. About why you did it. And some think you've gone soft. Most think you did the right thing. Dimitri glanced in the rearview mirror. All of them are wondering if this means we're expanding into South End. Baptiste hadn't thought that far ahead. He'd been operating on instinct, on anger, on something deeper than strategy. Maybe, he said, Eduardo won't give up more territory without a fight. Then we'll fight. Dimitri absorbed this. You're really willing to go to war over this? Baptiste thought about Rowan's face when she'd hugged him, about Claire's tears of relief, about the women in Riverside who could sleep without fear for the first time in years. Some things are worth fighting for, he said quietly. The Bentley pulled up to Baptiste's penthouse building. He stepped out, then paused. Dimitri. Yeah, boss? Tomorrow, I want you to pull records on every protection racket operating in adjacent territories. I want to know who's running them, what buildings they control, how they operate. Why? Because Riverside isn't the only building where this is happening. And if we can stop it in one place, we can stop it everywhere. Dimitri's eyes widened. Boss, that's half the city. That's more territory than anyone's ever controlled. I know. It would take years, cost millions, make enemies everywhere. I know that too. So why? Baptiste looked up at the lightning sky. Because a 7-year-old girl believed I could help. And she was right. If she can have that kind of courage, the least I can do is live up to it. He walked into the building, leaving Dimitri sitting in the car, processing what had just been said. Inside his penthouse, Baptiste poured himself a drink he didn't want and stood at the window overlooking the city. 12 years of careful control, of boundaries, of rules designed to keep emotion out of business, shattered in one night by a crumpled $5 bill and a child's desperate hope. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for giving me my mom back. Rowan. Baptiste stared at the message. Then, for the first time and longer than he could remember, he smiled. Not the calculated smile he used in negotiations. Not the cold smile that preceded violence. A real smile. Small, genuine. Because he'd been that powerless boy once, hiding while his mother was hurt, unable to help. And tonight, he'd made sure another child didn't have to live with that same helplessness. He typed back, "Take care of her. And remember, you're braver than you know." He hit send. Then he sat down, pulled out a notepad, and started making a list. Buildings where protection rackets operated, names of operators, territories that needed to change hands. It would take time, resources, careful planning, But Baptiste Paris had built an empire on less, and now he had something he'd been missing for years, a purpose beyond power. Outside his window, the sun rose over a city that didn't know it yet. But everything had changed, because one little girl had dared to ask the most dangerous man she knew for help, and he discovered that sometimes the most powerful thing in the world isn't fear. It's a child's courage forcing a ruthless man to remember his own humanity. Baptiste picked up his phone and made the first call. The war for a better city had just begun, and it started with a $5 bill. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.